So welcome to the WUN series of podcasts. This is a series of podcasts where we are inviting our partners to explore some topics in the utility sector. So my name is Louise Wopshire. I'm a WUN board member. So if I'd like panel to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, sure. So Chris Lloyd, I head up energy and utilities globally for WNS. We've just been acquired by Capgemini, so it's now WNS part of Capgemini. And I have a second job. I look after South Africa as a delivery country as well.
And I'm Sarah Williams. I'm working with SGN, particularly around the price control and all of the regulatory challenges that we face. Background in electricity, gas and in water.
Hello, and I'm Pete Tosden, Commercial Director for M Group Water Services. Been a QS man and boy all my life.
Welcome and thank you very much. So can we start with a question around to each of you, maybe to you, Chris, first of all. What's the toughest financial choice your organisation has had to make recently?
Sure, we've had a different time recently, obviously, with the acquisition of Capgemini. So it's been, we've wanted to invest in people, we wanted to invest in buildings and onshore, offshore locations. But due to the Cap acquisition, that's been put on hold a little bit. But as a business, we're very much into AI and we bring the HI, the human intelligence. So what we've had to invest in is our people. So we've invested in upskilling people, making sure they're ready for the AI wave that's obviously hit us and is going to be here for a while. And we're ready for the Capgemini wave, which clearly they bring a lot of AI. And if we could have our human intelligence into that, I think it's a good combination. So from an investment point of view from us, because we're very much about the customer, we're an outsourced provider that does everything from the customer, from the front end to chats, to voice calls, to back office processing, finance and accounting. We've just had to invest in our people. So that's been a bit of a challenge, is making sure we're ready for the AI wave that Capgemini is going to bring to us. Yeah,
no, it's certainly coming full force, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Exciting times though, and I think, where we're at with Cap is this migration. I think that the customer service world has been at a bit of a crossroads. It's like, do we go down AI and is it going to reduce jobs? Is it going to be getting rid of call centers? And I think with this kind of people we're watching to see how Cap's AI world and their tools and their technology and their IT platforms can work with what is typically a human AI, which is what we bring. People will be seeing to see where that goes, to see if that is going to add value for customers and our clients. And I think more will follow in a similar vein. I think that's the start of some of the smaller BPO companies getting acquired by large IT service integrators.
Big change.
Yeah.
Sarah, how about in your world?
So as a regulated utility, most people will know that we have our allowances set by Ofgem, the economic regulator. We also have a safety regulator, the Health and Safety Executive, who dictate a lot of what we need to do in terms of the work. So, for example, in the gas business, you have iron pipes that are within 30 metres of a building, all of which need to be replaced by 2032. Very clear mandate. The economic regulator then sets the allowances for how much we can have to be able to do that work. So one of the biggest financial challenges in SGN over the last number of years has been that when those prices were set by the regulator 5 years ago, they were set much lower than the reality of what we've faced in the supply chain. So we've ended up having to put an extra £360 million to support that work over and above the customer bill income that we get. So shareholders have had to fund that. And it's been really important that that work must be done because it's a safety driver. We want to keep our communities and customers safe. But it's been a really difficult time for shareholders when the regulatory deal just hasn't matched up to the reality of the costs.
Yeah, and I guess the cost of ignoring it will be much greater in the future.
Most definitely, and that's not a risk that our shareholders or our executive team or our business is willing to take. Our customers absolutely are at the heart of our decision making, but clearly we now are starting to head into another 5-year price control, and we need to make sure that those costs are baselined correctly to avoid a similar financial challenge going forward.
Yeah. Peter, how about with M Group?
Well, I'm really pleased to go on last, because selfishly as M Group, we're a growing company and quite a lot through acquisition. So our big challenge is investing in making us a smarter company and a joined up company. But if I park that up, listening to both of you two, there's a massive drive for us to be on the pitch with both of you, to face your challenges, Sarah, and help you with what you need to do to work smarter, more intelligent, and spend your money in the right place. But doing that with working with you guys, Chris, and there's a really big push for us to get on the pitch with the Capgeminis of this world to say, right, what can we do together? We dig holes and put some pipes in it, but actually we could be more smarter about that. And if we work with you, Chris, and then work with the client in the next regulatory cycles, we could all be a hell of a lot smarter about how we spend that money and do it right. So our challenge is it's almost a bit like when we spend money on bids, it's an overhead. We get no recovery for it until we win the work. We've got to invest money in working with the clients and companies like Chris's to do that. So we're going to have to invest and get a return on investment in the future.
And on a similar vein, how are you seeing some of the big players in the water industry responding to financial pressures, and how are you working with them on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic in a moment. We're really at a pivot. Utilities companies, in fairness, a lot of them were, because it was low complex work, weren't particularly, dare I say, intelligent in the way they go to work. They just do what the clients wanted them to do. And I think each utility contractor has to really start to think about how they want to get on the pitch with the clients in the future a little bit more. And the reverse, really, the clients welcome us in, say, look, come in, let's work together on these challenges going forward, because that pivot through AI and intelligent delivery, we're at the cusp of that now. And it's about time we got on the pitch and said, look, we know what we're doing out there. We know how to build stuff. We know where the problems are. We can help you. And I think we've been a bit too passive in the past on that.
I think that point on collaboration is really important. So having worked in a regulated utility for many years, many of us have been here for a long time. And how do we kind of get that new thinking, that new way of working into our businesses such that we then make good and sound investment decisions in the light of those financial challenges? So I think you make a really important point. Whereas perhaps historically, contractors have very much been used and kind of, banged on with a stick. It isn't that anymore. It's a much more mature, intelligent relationship that enables kind of technology, new ideas, new ways of thinking to be able to decrease our costs, but more importantly, actually get better solutions as a result of it.
Well, and at the moment, we're making our decisions to spend money on it, and the bit about those collaborative models, it's still very transactional. You do a bid, go do work for me and come back. We really need to be thinking about both parties spending some money in that collaborative model at the front end, all three of us, really. And as I said, that's very embryonic at the moment. I think we're all a little bit in our own sandpits at the moment, looking at, not navel gazing, but looking at how we solve it. We've actually got to open that up and say, and let's get the forums out there and work on it together.
Yeah, it's very much a partnership, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I just add there, I think, strategic partnerships are the way forward now, in our world especially. A lot of these organisations in the energy and water sector, they're third, fourth, fifth generation outsourcers. So the subcontractor beat us with a stick doesn't work anymore. It's like, how can you provide value for our end customers? How can you be on the hook for transforming our processes and operations, whether that's dealing with a customer, whether that's scheduling an engineer to go to site, etc. So yeah, the strategic partnership is very much the way forward, and we've definitely aligned to that. Some of our contracts or some of our clients now have been with us 20 years. So when you've had a 20-year relationship, you must be getting down that strategic partnership.
But how do the regulatory timescales and the models help us do that? That you're not hamstrung a little bit, but we've got to think a little bit differently of breaking how the regulatory model forces you into a certain way of doing stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a contrast there between perhaps water and energy. So I think certainly from a water industry perspective, the regulators, plural, recognising there are many, are very prescriptive around what the solution needs to be and how that solution needs to play out. I think in energy, there is a little more room for innovation. So what do I mean by that? So if I take, for example, some of the big challenges over recent years has been around asset investment, so capital investment. So clearly there's an obvious, go and build or go and rebuild. But actually a lot of what we're working on is understanding the data about how are those assets actually performing? Is there a way that rather than rebuild, can we refurbish? So there's ways in which you can spend customers' money in a lot more, in a better value way, but actually still delivers those outcomes that we need from a regulatory perspective. So I think the regulatory frameworks need to have a level of flexibility to enable those kind of, if we talked about collaborative, intelligent decision making,
and move the
elements
budgets
to it.
around. I think the TOTEX piece needs to be worked on a lot more, rather than there's my capex budget, there's my opex budget.
Yeah.
And I think we do get very constrained with on those being put in, you know, you get that where's my budget coming from discussion, and so we need to break that a little bit, don't we?
We do. And then the other challenge on top of all of that is the way that the regulatory settlement works is it's based on econometric modelling. So if you think about costs that we have to deliver, you know, certain widgets, for example, those historic costs are then used to set the future allowances, when actually sometimes it's a different solution that's needed. So I think that kind of, you know, it's a challenge for the regulators, I think, because, you know, they're even more removed from the delivery. But how do we make sure those regulatory frameworks have that flexibility built in such that you can get the same outcome but possibly through a different route?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And do you see market half hourly impacting that, the way that regulators work and assisting the industry in being more flexible? I mean, it's faster settlement, isn't it, ultimately, which will support customers. How do you see that feeding through?
Yeah, potentially. And I think as with all these things, you know, from a regulator's perspective, they've got many things to be able to juggle. So I think part of what we need to make sure is that whatever information we have and however frequently we have it, and also looking at kind of what the different outcomes are that we need to deliver for customers, that actually we do it in a way that is best value. So whichever way, you know, we can consider different options, it just needs to be that best value outcome, I think, for customers. Always keeping our customers in mind. It's the reason we're here. It's the reason we exist.
Yeah.
And there's enough data out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, if you think about the data in the
data
energy
rich.
and water sector, the analytics plays a huge part in it. But just going back to the market half hourly, you know, that's also driving, from a customer's perspective again, that's driving, you know, companies to change their billing platforms and change their systems. And that's a huge, you know, investment, you know. So the utilization of data is critical in that as well.
Yeah.
And within sort of WNS, Capgemini world, how are you seeing customer behaviour change there around costs? I mean, are they cutting back? Are they spending less, or are they actually investing more in offshoring? So are you seeing an uptick?
Yeah, I'd see more of an uptick at the moment in certain geographies. So there's a need for onshore. So there's a need for, you know, certain skills to be onshore, critical services, etc. And then places like South Africa are really, cultural alignment is there. You know, the time difference is only 1 hour. So places like South Africa are coming into the fore. You know, and from a US perspective as well, and it's growing there. So from a voice perspective, because it's a neutral accent, because the empathy and understanding the customer requirement is there. So more and more are coming to South Africa to see us. In fact, I fly to South Africa tomorrow, and there for 4 weeks. And there for 4 weeks because there's a number of clients coming to visit us, existing clients and potential clients wanting to see it and wanting to experience it. So that's definitely becoming more. And then if you look at the places like India, it's still prominent, but it's more for the chat, email type of services as well. You know, and obviously the labour arbitrage benefit of both entities is huge. So there's a definite need for it, but there's still a need for onshore and having some critical skills onshore. And we're always grappling with, how can we balance that? How can we give the service of a small onshore presence with a larger offshore? Because that's a better margin point for us. That's a better business model for WNS. It might change in the Capgemini world because obviously we can leverage some of their facilities and some of their infrastructure. But yeah, there's a definite need for it. They're not curbing back on it. I think a few years ago, a lot of water companies said they'd tried stuff offshore and they brought it back. And I think now they're at a point going, I need to save money. You know, the regulators squeeze me so much that I need to now look at other cost efficiencies, and the offshore model is one of those areas. And you know, we're not just an offshore or not just a customer service provider. We can provide things like analytics. You know, we can help onshore captives, if you like, perform better and work more efficiently. So again, we're being asked to go in and do some consultancy, process mapping, re-engineering, add some analytics and automation in there to make their kind of customer service contact centers work a little better than they have done previously. So it's a bit of a mix, but definitely offshoring is fairly prominent. Yeah.
So it's a real partnership, isn't it? Then rather than just a service you're providing, it's
yeah. Very much so. And you know, the more and more people are asking for transformation. So they're going, how can you transform my customer service? My CSAT score or my NPS score is this. I want to get it to this. And we're on the hook for that. We'll actually say, yeah, we'll get you to that. If we don't, there's a check, So we're then driven by it to make our operations more efficient or the right use of technology. But at the heart of it, we call them solvers in some cases. They're not, some of them are agents, but some of them are solvers, depending on the company we work with. Our solvers have to act with empathy and understand the customer. So you can't just be driven by cost saving. It's about empathy and delivering the right value for customers. Yeah.
And Sarah, how do you balance sort of political and customer sensitivity around price increases, long-term need to invest in the network resiliency, and decarbonisation? How do you balance those two? Because it's tricky, isn't it?
That's a big question.
I know.
Very big
Has
question.
it been solved yet?
And I think we are pretty confident it hasn't been solved yet. Maybe if I take a moment just to sort of step back and think about where the Cunliffe Review landed from a water sector perspective, it's a prime example, isn't it, over time, where regulators want to drive cost down. I think that very much has, over the last couple of decades, been the focus. It's about being, say value, but actually then that equals lower bills. Now, sadly, of course, sometimes lower bills then equals not enough investment. And I think it's fair to say that we've seen, some of that come through the learnings from the Cunliffe Review, both from Ofwat and the companies. If I look at it more generally around energy, clearly there's a massive challenge coming with decarbonisation specifically. And as you start to look at the level of investment that's going to be needed, particularly within transmission, but then also the level of investment for renewables, it's enormous. And what often we seem to get are almost the political messages which really demonstrate that allegedly bills will come down. And I can understand from a very long-term perspective that might well be the case. But in the short term, you have to look at the whole system cost. You can't just look at the cost of the renewable. You have to look at the whole system cost. So I think that, if I were in government, and I'm glad I'm not, I guess one of the key things I would be pushing is the need to make sure that we continue not just following one or not backing one horse. We need to make sure that we are diversifying our risk and our opportunity. So from a bills perspective, how do you make sure that politically, we're not pushing gas and electricity prices up, and water prices for that matter, beyond what customers can afford, but equally that we are being realistic about when and how we're going to reach our decarbonisation targets too. And I think that balance is where it's very tricky. But I think ensuring that we continue to support the use of gas for as long as we need to, and making that greener. There are many options. We talk a lot about hydrogen, but actually biomethane has an enormous role to play, potentially in greening the gas network, whilst also then investing in renewables at the right pace and at the right cost that our country can afford, notwithstanding what's happening politically across the world with the net zero target. So it's a really big question, and one where there's no one single silver bullet.
No silver bullet,
yeah.
I think just on that, I think we're at a stage where we have had that underinvestment either in water or need the increased investment in energy due to the different solutions. Shouldn't we be thinking about different models now and different investment models rather than just relying on the past model that quite frankly hasn't quite worked for us really and got us into the situation we're in, and maybe start thinking outside the box about how we can provide that investment and get that money, because it's all about getting money, isn't it?
It is, but I guess what's important here is making sure that as a country that we're investable. And, where are the signs that say the UK is open for business, particularly in the energy and utility space? I fear that with the regulatory settlements as they, stand, we perhaps aren't necessarily encouraging that level of investment into the UK that we could. And, who knows what may come in years to come, whether or not we'll see people exiting from the UK and putting their money elsewhere. But we really need to make sure that investability piece for economic growth in utilities is encouraged in the UK.
Yeah, and I suppose that's my point with the investment, is that it's a different, think outside the box, and therefore, the sort of the old, maybe the penal ways that we've had, think of a different way to actually make it investable. So we have to break off the old way and create some new ways that makes it investable, and not think about just it's coming from bills, etc. And if you don't succeed with the outputs, you get fines. I mean, I still can't get my head around that, and I'm happy to say that on this podcast. It just makes no sense to me. You're just taking money out of the system.
There was a real stark contrast when I moved from gas into water, and I was astonished at the level of the penalty regime within water. And you're absolutely right, where we've got companies who are struggling and failing, they're just constantly being battered with further penalties that then limit their ability to be able to reinvest. That doesn't exist in the same way in energy. That is different. And I think that you're absolutely right to call that out.
But where's the conversation on it? Where's the conversation? Where's the kickback in the media and the leaders, to say this is crazy. This is a crazy model.
Interestingly, I think to avoid some of those penalties and fines, and also the real tight margin they get from their customers, some water companies are coming to us and saying, can you just take on our customer service? Take on the customers, own the customers, and it's like, wow, this is a strange model to kind of get our head around. But the conversations are going on about not just operating, but some kind of ownership model of their customers. And then we could be on the hook for those fines, penalties or whatever.
Well, we're in the same place, Chris, in the past, we may not have taken that risk because it's so large. It's ridiculous. It's company busting. But there's a bit about where we're at with investment and solutions. You would bet on yourself with the solutions to actually succeed in doing it now. And as I say, a full circle from what I said initially about us working together now to go to the companies that we can bet on ourselves to solve your problems now.
Yeah.
I think as well it's interesting, again, contrasting water and energy. Of course, in energy, 25 years ago, we had the breakup of the generation supply distribution, didn't we? And interestingly, that's not the case in water, albeit there is for business. But if you think about it in terms of that point about, companies coming to you and asking you to own the customer, it is almost a question about whether or not that retail competition could actually be something that would be beneficial in water, such that it almost disaggregates the investment side from the service side, if you want to, in its simplest form, and then kind of that service offering then could be a choice for customers, whereas at the moment they aren't able to choose in the water side. So I find that quite notable in terms of a difference in the sectors, and I wonder whether there's some potential reform that's needed in that space.
And there's lots to learn from the energy sector as well, because it hasn't been smooth at all. So
yeah. I mean, it's just an interesting dynamic. The energy does have, face a subtle, quite a different challenge to water. The population growth we're going to have. Obviously, it's in the news about the spills and the environmental, but actually, there's this not even looming. It is there this water supply issue that if we don't address it, we will run out of water. And at the moment we have this political discussion around water bills, right, wrong, or whatever. We need to get off the pot here bloody quickly, quite frankly. It's for the country we are, we've got to face up to this properly and face into it and get away from this political discussion and bouncing around the blame, etc.
It'd be an interesting debate for another time, I guess, but would energy companies want water customers? I mean, they all want to sell more services, don't they? They want the energy companies now to add their value. They have to kind of expand their range of services into telco, into white goods are coming back in. I remember back in the day, my mum and dad going to the shop, Scottish Power shop, and buying their washing machine.
Yes,
and all that.
Of course.
They're now selling it, obviously, all online now and digital. Yeah. But I wonder if the water customers would be of interest for energy companies as they look to add value to their service offering.
You're seeing some of the smaller energy companies starting to diversify into water.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Just from a supply perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Can we move on to a bit of a discussion around EDI, Sarah? As budgets tighten generally across the industry, how are SGN protecting EDI and their focus on sort of that equity, diversity, inclusion, the importance of it within the business?
Yeah, so you're right, budgets are tightening, but actually the challenges are getting harder. And I think one of the key ways in which we can address those difficult challenges is by having very many different people in our organisation. I mentioned earlier about how many of us have been here for decades, and I think there's nothing better than having some fresh blood around the table. And that doesn't necessarily have to just be a gender mix. It can be, different socioeconomic backgrounds. It can be people with protected characteristics, neurodiversity. There's so many different types of people in this world that I think could add huge value into the utility space, but perhaps would never even contemplate joining a utilities company. So I think a big part of what we need to do at SGN, and I'm sure other companies as well, is to make ourselves more attractive to perhaps the non-standard type of utilities person. And I'm afraid I kind of fit that mold, albeit I am female, I suppose. But how do we make sure that we really attract those people who have got so much to bring, and in particular making our jobs accessible. So, for example, in a previous company where I've worked, a big part of what we looked to do was how we advertise. How do we make sure that the job adverts are reaching people who otherwise wouldn't consider working for us? We also have looked at things like, removing the interview process, which we know for so many people, unfortunately, is a massive hurdle. Equally, looking at what qualifications do you need? So some jobs, yes, okay, you can't be the CFO if you're no good at maths, but there are many jobs in the utility sector.
Some people do quite well out of that.
There are many jobs in the utility sector where actually, having GCSE maths and English, it doesn't need to be a prerequisite. So I think there's lots of things that we can do to really encourage and open up, as well as, of course, the obvious graduate and apprenticeship programmes, which I'm really pleased to say SGN are investing in as well.
Peter, how do you think we're doing on diversity and inclusion in the utility sector?
How long we got? So many different facets to that. I think if I start off with that horrible phrase, "we come a long way," I fear that there's the comma after that is and as far as enough as we need to, it's very frustrating to watch, actually. And just listening to Sarah talk there around how we can deal with it. As a contractor, so I'm going to speak very candidly now, as a set of contractors, we are predominantly white male. We don't have those lived experiences, so we don't really understand the problems we need to solve, or in some cases really agree that they exist. We think we've come far enough. And I was talking to someone the other week about it isn't financial pressure per se that's the problem, is actually time. And as a contractor, that we have to make money. That's what we do. We make money, and to exist, and to do that we have to deliver. And now we do fortunately have safety there as well. That tags on with delivery. We have to deliver safely. And we do that with resources. So we have a resource challenge. So the biggest challenge going forward, outside AI and solutions, etc., is resources. How do we, with the amount of money we're going to be spending in infrastructure across the board, it's about resources. And EDI plays a massive part into that. But I tell you now, as a set of white males leading it, we are not looking at the EDI as strongly enough as the solution. It will still be, what's our employee proposition? What's the salaries? What's the training? It'll be the things that we know about, rather than how do we, increase those numbers of women or ethnic, etc., into our business. Because we don't really understand it enough. We go to the reinforces, we go to things we know. We know how to improve a salary package or how to train, but we don't really know how to improve someone's experience on site or in the workplace, because we haven't lived it. So it's too hard for us to fix. So we don't go there, and we don't spend time and effort on it. So I think there needs to be a massive shift. And we saw it decades ago. The biggest shift in safety was because clients invested in it and paid the premium for it through the what they bought in a tender, and we got paid for it. So we dealt with it. Whether we like it or not, we probably really need the clients to really kick us harder on it, but help us invest in it. So we've come a long way, but we are, for me, very much at the bottom of the curve.
Yeah, it's holding. I guess it's your clients holding you to account,
yes,
isn't it?
Absolutely, and they'll have commitments in the bids, etc. But they don't really hold us to it, and you can see that in the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of people turning up for a bid and actually being told to go away because it's just they've turned up with 4 white men.
Yeah.
Rather than a diverse panel.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're actually being.
We do the reverse. We'll make sure there is a diverse panel there, but that doesn't reflect us.
Yeah.
We played it, but I'd be.
It's got to reflect what you're about, hasn't it? You can't just fudge it, can you? Yeah.
Chris, you go onto any website of tier ones and go on the management team.
Yeah.
HR, legal.
Yeah.
Comms.
Yes. So
I think there's something here about role modelling. And I kind of speak of this from my own experience. So when I look back in my career, I had a couple of women who, and I'm specifically talking now about women, who had really managed to push through to the kind of executive level. Mm-hmm. When I look back, they were inspirational for me. and they gave me some hope that actually I may well be able to do the same. And I take that responsibility really seriously. So when I sit around executive tables and I'm sat on boards, the importance of actually others being able to look up and see, women, I'm not degree level educated, for example. So, my socioeconomic background is lower too. And just kind of knowing that, there are opportunities, but you have to be able often to push even harder, but also you have to believe in yourself. And I think it's the role of mentoring is so important. And I'm not just talking about women, but the role of mentoring is hugely important, because what you can then do, and I specifically use the word mentoring and not coaching in that instance, because it is about, this is how I've done it, let me help you. But equally, I think the role of coaching, just so that people can see their own potential. I think so often we perhaps look and see, as you mentioned, the kind of middle-aged white man and think, well, I don't look like that, I don't sound like that, I haven't got that background, therefore there's no place for me. So I think we've got a really important role to encourage and to give those younger people, I think, some real hope that actually they've got a great place in the seniority of the workplace going forward.
And I actually totally agree, Sarah, and all that, and it is massive. And through my discussions with young ladies, that is massive. But that's only going to go so far with the resilience that they have day to day, and it has to be on white males to stand up and be counted. And this phrase about allies, if you've got 10 to 20% of women in the industry, you need another 30-40% to stand by you to downplay the people that aren't standing up and being counted. I've been on many boards and around many boardrooms, and it would horrify you, the conversations that we still have around, it's now white, prejudice and it's around, positive discrimination. It's not about that. And yet you still have those conversations because the women aren't around the table to kick back. So the allies have to, we really have to educate ourselves as white males. We have to. And that's not happening quick enough.
I think having the role model, the female role models, is really important as well, because I've spoken to people at work who've said they're trying to fit in, but they don't want to have to behave like the other men in their team. They would just want to be themselves. How do they go about it? So having those female role models who haven't done that is really, really important.
Yeah, true.
You should be able to be at work, be authentic, and that's how you have a diverse workforce. You don't have a diverse workforce by women joining and then behaving like men. They need to be allowed to be themselves. And I think that's really, really important. That's where the role modelling is absolutely crucial. You're right.
But that's also why you've got them in your team, because they bring a different perspective, different view, whether that's women, whether that's younger people, whether that's people from different parts of the world. We talked before about the locations I work in. It's even, I think the UK is definitely more advanced than what it was. But if you look at India and you look at South Africa, for example, I'll name drop now, Nelson Mandela's grandson, his name's Zondwin. I met him in South Africa a few months back. He's now pushing the kind of employment agenda. He's saying like the apartheid stuff is what obviously his dad was renowned for, but now it's like, how do they get the communities into jobs? 35% unemployment, and the government in South Africa have helped. We're incentivized by giving different ethnic groups and different diverse groups roles in our company, and we get funded for that as well. And then we've gone one step further. We've created a thing called U Academy, which is taking people in these hard townships, basically, getting them ready for work. Whether that's work for us or whether that's work for our competitors or somebody else, it doesn't matter. We educate them, we get them ready, and then we can employ them, or they're employable to other people. So in other parts of the world, it's even more challenging, and again in India, if you think, there's a caste system, there's a different dynamic again there, which plays its role. And, I was lucky enough or honoured enough last year to be named as an allyship finalist at the Women in Utilities Awards for the stuff we're trying to do in the utilities business unit. I was looking at it yesterday. There's a lot of integration tracks with Capgemini at the moment going on, and one was about the team. And I looked at one of our other sectors team, and they were every single one of them, 25 of them men, and most of them brown Indian men as well, because that's the culture we've come from as a business. 40% of my leadership team are women. So I was actually quite pleased that we're going that right way. But they can't just be seen as, well, it's a white woman, that's a tick in the box. They have to add that value, and they have to be, like you say, respected, and then enable other people in the business to follow that they follow that suit. So I'm lucky enough to have some good people who really are interested in setting up some kind of training schemes for other women who want to pursue their careers and stuff, and we do that in partnership with WUN as well. But we actively push that as much as we can. So it's interesting across three countries.
I'll leave it as a rhetorical question, but do you think white males really believe that diversity inclusion, regardless of the fact there's scientific things proving it? Do you think white males really believe that diversity inclusion increases margin at the bottom line? I almost leave it as a rhetorical question, but I don't think we do, and that's why we don't address it fully, because the time that we put our efforts to has to make money as a contractor, and I don't think we believe that it does.
I don't think I've married it to, does it increase margin or improve revenue, whatever.
Efficiency and make it a better company, etc., which ultimately for us has to mean that we make, we're sustainable in making margin.
It's not efficiency. It's about making better decisions. Different
decisions.
Different decisions.
Rather than everyone having the same view around the table. I don't think white males are really bought into that.
I think it's mixed. I do think it's mixed. I think I've met some fantastic allies who've been phenomenal, but I think it is mixed. I've also had some conversations with some men who've told me they don't see what the problem is. So I think it really.
So when we talk about lived experiences, my lived experience around those board tables is that we don't.
Yeah,
we don't. So, and if I flip it to that bit about, I sometimes think we look at it through the wrong lens. We look at, say, climate. Is there a climate issue or whatever? Actually, no. Let's just have cleaner air. That's a nice thing to do. Flip the arguments. And I think if you look at the resource issues we're going to have in the future, EDI plays a massive part in that. And I think we should flip the rhetoric and the narrative around it into actually EDI will solve those resource issues, and then we can get a win-win there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Agree with that.
I think the other thing, bringing back from the kind of international experience back into the UK, particularly in the sort of businesses that I run, we are local businesses, we serve a community. And I think what's really important is that our workforce needs to represent our community. And I think that, we recognise that, for example, if you're operating in the middle of Wales or you're operating in the middle of London, you're going to have a very different set of people that are in your community. So I think, as businesses, if nothing else, that's our starting point is does our workforce represent the communities that we're working in? And if the answer to that is no, then we're clearly doing something wrong, aren't we? And part of that something wrong, I'm not sure how much of it is deliberate versus how much of it is just that we've just worked in the way we have for so long that we perhaps then aren't attracting people who are perhaps not our traditional mould.
I mean, it's definitely an issue. We don't spend enough time and effort going out into the world selling what we do. You mentioned it earlier, coming into utilities and, as an industry, it's grown into something fantastic over the last decade, and what we've got going forward in the future. But where are our efforts going out into the market, going out to the colleges and universities, going out to the schools? We don't maybe do enough of that.
Yeah, it happens in pockets, doesn't it? But you're right, it doesn't. It's just not doing enough overall.
We have a quite neat recruitment tool now. So as part of our recruitment, it's all based on Gen AI, and so that takes away whether you're male, female, from a different background. It comes up with a solution for you, and then the assessments happen and stuff. So that's quite a neat thing, It's like, I was there in South Africa last week or the week before. 365,000 people in this database, and it's like, wow, the Gen AI can produce. This is the person you should be hiring for that role. And then it will be like whether that's male, female. So so it's interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Question to all of you: with the current pressures around sector and sort of investment, where should companies and utilities be investing so that we are avoiding greater costs further down the line? And what's the single sort of biggest policy change you think that will really make a difference?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's the theme of today, really. It's resources and AI. Using both of those to make us more intelligent and better, and actually, as I said earlier, and joining up. I don't think we're anywhere near doing that. We're still over there a little bit, and we're starting to come together a bit. But I think if we can join up with those models, those commercial models, and look to how we can invest and get better. But the resources is massive.
Yeah.
There's so much money is going to be spent in this over the next decade or so, and we simply haven't got anywhere near enough people to do that.
And where's that going to go? So my background's, I'm an electrical engineer, so I was Scottish Power, Manweb back in the day. That's when I did my engineering training. Is it going to go down I was thinking about this, is it going to down like the completely automated workforce? Because my golf club the other day, there was like 10, I think, automated lawnmowers that were just
that's a really good shout.
So my greenkeeper at the golf club, his job's changed. He doesn't cut grass anymore. He just sends off these bots to go and cut grass for him into a different shape. Is there a role for that in utilities, do you think, or is it?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we've obviously got the remote pieces of kit and etc. Of course we have, and yes, definitely. So, and once again, we're very early days in that, really, and we don't know really where the future lies. A little bit about, I've always said, like in highways with the matrix signs, and they build all these comms and they dig holes and whatever, and they go to the matrix. You don't need signs anymore. Everyone's got Google Maps in their car. So there's going to be, is there going to be a whole host of, are we going to not have broadband anymore and it's all going to be Wi-Fi? So I think there's a whole host of different things that might drive a different way of doing stuff as well, that we don't have to dig a hole.
So robotic field services, that's your next step then.
Yeah, but we're nowhere near thinking about that. And it comes back to investment again, Chris. Who's going to spend the money on it? It's going to be all the startups and the people, the brave people. Whereas actually, should the tier ones, and the clients say, right, let's put more money in this and let's do some investment. We've got RDEC, I suppose. Maybe we should think about more about how we utilise RDEC and join ourselves up.
Let's do it between us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But there are some really good innovations out there. And I think probably the area that we need to invest in is innovation. So, if you think about the way in which particularly networks have operated, they've been the same for, tens of decades. And I think that the opportunity through innovation is huge. So as an example, we've now got a car that can drive around streets and that can pick up gas leaks that you can't smell with the human nose. And actually that enables you to be well on top of your, your program of either replacements or repair, well in advance of there ever being any kind of safety issue or a customer even needing to interact with you. So, and the use of sensors, the use of data, I really think that is the way to go. Really to make sure that we are, for every pound we're spending, we're putting it in the right place rather than just traditionally working on kind of fault curves that we've been using for 20, 30 years.
Flipping the narrative, isn't it? So instead of firefighting,
absolutely
ahead.
preventative.
Yeah.
And so I'd link that into my kind of what's the biggest, regulatory or policy change. I think actually there really needs to be an enormous uptick in the innovation investment. I think whilst on the one hand, there will be a challenge on today's bills, I think that the longer term benefit of us investing in innovation not only will lead to lower bills, but I think more importantly, it will lead to the right solution. I fear at the moment, we're doing a lot of let's build in the UK. Actually, are there different ways that we can achieve the same outcome? Maybe where we have things that use less energy, for example, or that we have different ways in which we heat our homes. Do we heat ourselves? Do we heat certain parts of spaces? There are many different ways that I think innovation and technology could lead us to different solutions, which ultimately be better cost for our customers.
And my challenge to clients is come and talk to the contractors, because we can get in bed together with you and do that and find a different ways of investing in it as well, because it is in our interest to do so.
I guess on our side, it'll be digital platforms, and data excellence, from a customer perspective, understanding usage, understanding your bill accuracy, etc. That should drive demand down, and understand that how you're going to manage your own consumption. So whether that's, sustainable as well, heading down that route. So I think every energy company and water company now, they're catching up, they're changing their systems, their billing platforms, they're moving to the new digital platforms anyway. So that's a huge investment for all the companies at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, could I ask everyone just for one key takeaway from the conversation we've had so far? Have that start with you, Chris?
I guess it's what I started with. I think, where at this crossroads of AI and HI, human intelligence and automated intelligence. I think that's the pivotal point for us from the lens of a customer. And interestingly, how can we play a role, or how can companies like WNS, part of Capgemini, play a role in the field services side of things as that goes towards more kind of automation and AI technology as well? Yeah.
I think the main takeaway for me is that clearly we can talk about money and investment. We can talk about technology and data. But I think probably my one thought after the end of this podcast is how important people are. Because actually, whether that's people in terms of our customers, or whether it's people in terms of those of us that lead businesses and those that work in the businesses, we're always going to need people in one way, shape or form. We're always going to have customers. And so keeping people at the heart of what we do, I think in turn will give us, great futures, both professionally, personally, and great communities too.
I think it's where We've been very transactional in the past, and I think we're coming to a new era of the different parts of the industries having their lens and joining up. And I think we have to really embrace that and get on the pitch together to solve the future problems. Whereas I think the transactional nature and the regulatory nature and this very administrative way of going to work has put chains on us, and we need to free those up, I think.
Perfect. So it's collaboration, people and AI, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. That was really, really interesting chat. So yeah, thank you, Chris, Sarah and Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.